Hi everyone, this is Simar here. Today we have a very special guest. We've got Nathan here, Nathan McCullough. He's my hubby and my partner in business and life. He is a holistic health coach and an entrepreneur. He's also a business coach, an athlete, and he has been coaching people around the world in business and in health. So today we have a very, very special topic that we want to talk about. It's called fixed versus growth mindset. So welcome, Nathan.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's a pleasure.
We are so excited to have you here.
And I'm excited to be here.
And this happens to be your favorite topic. So
it is.
I'm all super excited to hear more about it.
Great.
So tell me something like, what is the difference between fixed and growth mindset?
Well, I think the first thing is understanding what a mindset is, right? So you have a fixed growth mindset, you have a growth mindset. But I think the first thing to understand is what a mindset is, right? So the way that I define a mindset is it's a set of beliefs that determine what you think is possible for you. And so I think it's important to understand where that comes from. So I think about it in two ways. One is it's a set of beliefs that determines what's possible for you. And then I also believe that it's like the way that you see the world as either a friendly place or a dangerous place, or something that a view of life as something that happens to you, right? You're sort of a passive recipient to what happens to you in your life, or it's something that happens for you, and it's sort of a creative process. So I think of that in terms of mindset. I think it's important to understand that, because inside of the fixed mindset is actually a belief that you're born a particular way, and you either have skills or you don't, you have talents or you don't, and that you are a particular way, right? You have a set IQ, you have a certain range of possibilities that's determined when you're born. And a growth mindset is a belief that it doesn't matter sort of where you're born or who you are, what your race, religion, creed, whatever, ethnicity, that there is always a capacity to learn and grow and develop any sort of skill set based on hard work and that type of thing. So it's a belief that who we are is actually malleable. It's changeable. And so it's important, I think, to understand what a mindset is, and then the difference between those two things.
So
does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So have you seen this play out in your own life?
Well, I think I think we all have a particular identity, right? So that's sort of the story that we have about who we are. And most of the time, okay, we're not conscious of the identity that we have for ourselves, right? We grow up in a particular family. Like, you guys are from India, I'm from the US. Like, right off the bat, there's going to be an immediate cultural interpretation of what it is to be a man, what it is to be a woman, what our roles are. And then inside of that, you can grow up in, let's say, an upper class, middle class, lower class. And then there's a particular interpretation of what type of person grows up in these different socioeconomic situations. And then there's, things that happen to us that we're young, abuse or love, things happen to us in our life when we fail, things like that, right? Where there are things that happen to us, and there's sort of unconscious decisions that we make about who we are. And then these decisions that we make about who we are become unconscious, and then they give us this sort of set of what we think is possible for us based on that. And I think awareness of that is the case is important for you to be able to change from the fixed to the growth mindset. So I think in my own life, because I actually grew up. So one of the advantages that I think that I have in life has nothing to do with my race or where I grew up or anything. Like, obviously those things do come with certain advantages, but I think the biggest one is I think I was parented well. I think my parents instilled in me from a very young age this belief that, you know, you can do anything and that you're amazing and that we love you no matter what, this type of thing. So, but I do think that I have if I look back at my childhood, there's sort of areas where I've had a fixed mindset and I've had a growth mindset. You know, as entrepreneurs, I think we have to have a kind of growth mindset that's built in, because a fixed mindseted person will not risk anything at all. So if there's a possibility of them looking bad, if there's a possibility of failure, they won't engage in a particular activity like that, because they feel like that failure means something about who they are. Whereas when you have a growth mindset, like a more entrepreneurial mindset, you understand that failure is actually part of the growth. It's part of the process, and that you actually need failure. So I think in my own life, being an athlete, you know, going into business for myself at a pretty young age, there was a lot of growth mindset in that. But as you guys know, you know, I also along the way developed alcoholism. So I had a particular relationship to alcohol that I used to numb unpleasant feelings about myself, right? So there was some belief about myself that I felt there was something that was not changeable about me, that was bad, wrong, negative, something like that, right? And the way that I numbed that feeling was through the use of alcohol. And so I can see that, you know, going through that period of my life as an area where I was really fixed about that. Like, I really believed that there was some sort of gene or some sort of trait. There was something that I did not have control over that was like inside of me somewhere that made me not have control over my use of alcohol, you know, in comparison to other people. So I can see that as a fixed area. And then I can also see these other areas of my life where I had a growth mindset. So I don't think that we're fixed or growth in general. I think that we can have a fixed or growth mindset in different areas of our life. And in that area, obviously, the more personal development that I've done and the more that I understand that who we are for ourselves, our identities are completely made up, right? Then I learned, there's nothing wrong with me. I just had a behavioral pattern that turned into a physical dependency that then created, you know, this way of thinking. And then once I realized that, you know, all of these negative stories that I was making up about what alcoholism means about me or whatever, once I realized that wasn't true, then I've been able to take the growth mindset into that area, and now I'm not an alcoholic anymore. So I've been able to use that. Does that make sense? You can see those, how they play out.
Yeah, definitely. Like, even in my own life, I can see that there are areas where I would be like fixed about certain things, especially if I have no experience of ever like doing work in that field. Then I'd be like, oh, maybe I can't just do that, you know. But then there are areas where it's like constantly you're just growing, constantly I'm like, you know, taking action, and it's okay. And, you know, you just know that, okay, you can grow. So what strategies would you give someone if they are like, say, in some area of their life, they're in a fixed mindset? So what strategies can they use to actually, you know, change from that to move into growth mindset?
Okay, that's very important, right? Because just knowing something makes no difference. So the first thing that I would say is read or listen to, whatever you like, the audiobook called Mindset by Carol Dweck. I personally believe that it's like the most important book that I've ever read, because it was that at that time, she actually changed the entire landscape of the psychological tradition in the US. So our psychology used to be sort of operate with this belief that people were a particular way. You had a particular personality, and then you sort of live inside of that your whole life. And what we've learned through neuroscience is that the brain has plasticity, which means it can change. You're not a fixed particular way. And she actually brought that into the field of psychology and changed the landscape. And she had showed the difference between these types of mindsets. So I think that's really, really important. Because once you learn to identify what a fixed mindset type of thinking is, the best way to cultivate a growth mindset is by bringing awareness to when you're in the fixed way of thinking, right? So let me just give an example. If I'm doing something like, say I'm playing basketball, right? And I'm playing basketball and I am aware of the fact that I'm not very good at dribbling or shooting or whatever. Okay. And then I see someone who is really good at dribbling and shooting. Okay. A fixed mindseted person will see someone that is better at them than something, and they will believe that that person has something that they don't have that makes them successful. And therefore, they can't be like that because they don't have that special thing, whatever that talent. It's called the talent myth. And a growth mindseted person will look at someone who is better at them at something, and they'll say, wow, that is amazing, right? If I practice hard every day on my dribbling and my shooting, I can be just like that person. So they say, I can't do that. And then they add the word yet. I can't do that yet. And built into that is the understanding that you can do that anything is possible through discipline and consistency. So that's one way, is when you catch yourself saying, oh, I can't do that, or I'm not, I just don't have that ability or whatever. You can actually consciously catch yourself and just add on yet at the end of that sentence and feel the difference. If I say, I can't do that yet, there's something that happens when you put that yet at the end of the sentence that's very empowering. So you can feel that energetically when you do that. So one is read the book Mindset. That's an amazing one. And the second one is when you understand how the fixed mindset shows up, you can begin to catch when that happens, and then ask yourself, how could I see this differently? So like that, comparison is a big one. This people are on social media and stuff all the time, right? Social media is amazing because it allows for things like this, right? It allows for long distance connection, all of that. But it also creates this really pernicious thing that happens where people will get on Instagram or whatever, and they'll look at somebody's photos, their six pack, they'll get recognition in some way. And if you ever get in the place where you're comparing yourself to somebody else, this is a fixed mindset, right? Because you diminish yourself in comparison to somebody else. And unfortunately, social media, and this is played out, the research has shown that levels of depression, anxiety, a lot of these things are going up. And we think there's a very strong correlation between the amount of comparison that's going on through social media and the decrease in self-esteem that we see with young people today. So that's just something to be aware of as well, is just when does that come up for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like a lot of times people are not even aware of the fact that they are comparing themselves. Like, it's really important to be able to tell the difference. Like, am I comparing myself where I'm putting myself down when I look at someone's account, or am I looking at someone's account and I'm actually getting inspired to be in action, to do something more?
Exactly.
But it's such a thin line, because you could be like, no, I really like this person's account and that's why I'm looking at it. But it matters whether you're looking at it so you can learn and develop yourself, or whether you're looking at it and thinking, oh my God, my life really sucks.
There's
Look at
something
all
wrong
these
with
people. Look at all
Exactly.
these people. They're doing so much. What's wrong with me?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's really important. And I think just to add on to that, there's one little thing that's really important that also gets a little bit tricky, because I think it's important to understand you're not going to go from fixed to growth overnight. Okay. So one dangerous thing that comes in is people will learn the difference between fixed and growth. They'll decide that being in growth mindset is better. And then they'll lie to themselves about having a growth mindset when they don't actually have one. I see this all the time. And I'm also guilty of that. So because you make a value judgment, I don't want to be like that. I want to be like this. So I'm just going to self-identify as somebody who has a growth mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And the dangerous thing about that is because you now cut off your ability to develop the growth mindset in that area, right? So the other thing that's really important in this area is that you learn, this is the tricky part, you learn to tell the truth about yourself in a way that doesn't incorporate diminishment. So for example, if I know that I'm not maybe the best writer, okay, I want to be honest with myself about that, but not like I'm a bad writer, but like, hey, I can get better. I really need to get better in this area. And this is very difficult because we actually, I think, not intentionally, but I think we give people the wrong information sometimes. And we just say, be positive, tell yourself good things. And I think that there's an element of denial that comes into that, where you do want to have this really authentic relationship with being able to take criticism, first of all, from other people and see that as an opportunity. And then also be able to sit down and audit what's true about yourself, with the intention not of determining whether you're good or bad in this area, right? Being moral about that, but figure out where you can put in extra work and develop yourself in this area. I think that's really, really important. And I don't think that's a skill that we're giving our children enough. I think we're teaching kids that, we want to be like just really positive all the time, which is important to be positive. But I think there is a level of authenticity that's required, where you can just take an honest look at what's going on in a particular area of your life and be willing to say, I want it to be better than that, without meaning that there's something wrong with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. In fact, I was listening to this book from Marie Forleo, Everything is Figureoutable, and
yeah,
I don't
she's
know whether
amazing.
it was in that or one of her videos, but she talks about how, everyone that is a creative person, and they're creating something of their own, whether it's a digital course or whatever it is that they're creating. She's like, creative people are perfectionists. And a lot of times they really, really are hard on themselves. She's like, a really good point to start is just remember that when you start, you are really not, your first work is not going to be your best work. And just put it out there.
Yeah.
And don't expect that it will ever be your first work will never ever be your best work. So don't worry about making it perfect. Just put it out there. And then as you go through it, it will get better.
Exactly. And if you think about this, it's very interesting that you say that, right? Because you can see how kids oftentimes have a pure growth mindset. And then the fixed mindset is something that's learned over time, because we feel the discomfort of failing, or someone says something about us, you're stupid or you're shy, and we make that, but we just accept that as true. And but you think about kids, we as human beings, we wouldn't be able to walk and ride bikes if we had a fixed mindset about, looking bad when we fall over, when we're learning to walk, or, falling over on a bike, things like that. Kids have this pure growth mindset where they don't have this relationship to failure, where it's a governor on what they are willing to do because they're afraid to look bad or whatever. So that's a really great example of, of that, because the key is, just like riding a bike, you're going to fall over. And as long as you're willing to understand before you start any project that it's going to get bad before it gets better, and that doesn't mean anything about who you are as a human being, right? Then you have so much freedom just to fail, because failing is such an important part of our growth and development as human beings. And this is one of the areas where I feel really concerned about the cultural narrative around protecting people from unpleasant experiences, because I really do believe that, like, if you or anybody thinks back on their life in areas where they really grew, it's when you went through difficult times and you use that as a catalyst to grow, or, you know, it's in those times where you have a real opportunity to grow. And if we are only willing to go and do things that we're comfortable with, or we know that we're going to be safe when we do them, we're going to end up with a life that's not inspiring to ourselves.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Simar.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely remember, you know, most things that I'm really good at doing now. Even as a teacher, when I first started, I was really not good. I had no idea what I was doing. And it was like all over the place. To try to get little kids to tidy up their own stuff was like a complete joke to me. But because I kept doing it, I just kept getting better and better and better, to the point where it got, you know, so good that I just tell the kids to do that and they just happily do it. No problem, you know? And I think, like, when I look at anything right now that I'm really good at, it's literally something that I have put in a lot of time developing myself in. You know, there are very few things that I'm good at just because I'm just naturally talented at it. Because I just, like you were talking about stories, you know, I can remember that I had this whole story that I'm shy. And I couldn't, back then, I couldn't talk in front of more than 2 people at a time. If there's 2 people there in the room, I would be so paranoid that they're going to judge me that I couldn't really speak up, you know. I would just completely keep everything to myself. And it was very uncomfortable for me if they're asking me for my opinion on something, because especially something personal. So, so it was like, over time, because I kept working on this area and I kept developing myself, developing my, you know, public speaking skills, it's come to the point now, it doesn't even occur to me as something that I would ever be worried about or scared about. It's just so natural for me to just be able to communicate what I need to communicate with confidence and coming from my heart, you know? And I feel like I can see that sense, that basically in every area of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, and to kind of toot you and Deep's horn a little bit, if you think about your life, right? It's not common for, you know, 2 young women that come from India to have the courage or the guts to be able to leave India and go to, for example, New Zealand. You guys went to New Zealand with no job and you were sleeping basically like in a basement with a little tiny window, right? No job and no prospects, you know, and for your ability to be able to go out and do that and then make it, right? You now have a self-affirming experience in your life where you know that you can go out and do something that you don't know how you're going to do it, but you just commit to doing it and you go out and you make it happen. These are the types of things that are very formative for us as human beings, where we go out and do these things. Now, I will share with you, I've never thought about this before, but when I introduced you guys to the entrepreneurial business that we're doing at the moment, right? You're both teachers. And what immediately was there for you was, we're not business people, we're teachers, right? We can't do that because it wasn't consistent with your identity, right? However, you know, I don't know if you've thought about this before, but because you had already made the move from India to New Zealand, you'd already embarked on a journey and done something that was way outside your comfort zone and made it work, there's a very good chance that you've been able to make this transition from teacher to entrepreneur because of this experience that you've had in the past and the evidence that you got for yourself at the level of your own identity, that you can do things that feel impossible for you, or you can do things that are outside of your comfort zone. And yeah, so just to kind of toot your horn, that just occurred to me. You know, you guys have been a living example of a growth mindset in that area, you know, and I'm sure you can find areas in your life where you're also fixed as well. But that's the type of example in life that's so important, that we do those things, because that's, I mean, I'm sure you guys have probably grown and developed yourself over the last, 5-6 years so much inside of that commitment to growing.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, you just said that, there are areas where you could be fixed and growth. Like in the business journey, it's like you are dealing with failure almost every other day because you're taking action. And
Yeah.
it's like you always have to constantly think about, okay, like, like there was time, this business has skills like any other business.
Mm-hmm.
When I was like, just having to contact with, get in touch with new people, it was like, oh my gosh, this is just too much. But now done it for so many, like, put in so many hours into this, that just seemed like, oh, that's not the hard part. What's the next thing? So it's like constantly you bumped up with like, okay, what's the next thing? And it's a very growing field. And it's like you're constantly bumped into failures, and for a lot of people they find it so hard to actually keep going when it's like when it's like, okay, every day, and then there are people that tell you, no, I'm not interested, and then there are people that say, okay, yeah, I'm interested. So you're constantly living in that a world of this jumping from fixed to growth to fixed. And then you're like, okay, maybe it's not for me, and maybe it's for me. Yay, today is a good day. So yeah. So what do you say to that? Like, how can somebody who's just started in their entrepreneurial journey be mindful, but at the same time actually enjoy the journey? Like,
that's a great question. I think one of the most important things is to surround yourself with people who are also doing the same thing, right? It's going to be really hard for you to have a massive transformation in your life and make a big shift in some area if you have people constantly telling you, don't do that, play it safe, don't do that, play small, don't do this, that are like conspiring against you being small, okay? It's going to be very difficult. So, whereas if you're surrounded by people who say, you know what, that's going to be hard, but that's going to be amazing. That's a great challenge. You should do that. You know what? It might be difficult, but I know that you can do it. I believe in you. Like this, if you have people that are constantly reinforcing your decision, then it makes the journey a lot more difficult. I'm sorry, a lot easier. And then you also seeing other people struggle is weirdly helpful as you go along the way, because sometimes we convince ourselves that our pain or our struggle is like unique to us. We somehow have a really unique relationship to suffering, and that's just not true. We all struggle along this path, and so having other people that you can go through the ups and downs with is really important. So I think. But what you said, I think, is really important. Like, even if you look at your life now, right? You guys have just embarked on this journey of becoming personal trainers. I'm sure that if I asked you 2 years ago, whether you believed me, whether in 2 years' time, if I told you you were going to be a personal trainer, you would be like, yeah, okay. Yeah, right. Yes. Right? But here you are along the way. And I know that it sucks every day when you wake up and you have to go through that material, and it's challenging because part of your identity is not yet aligned with, I am personal trainer. But as you go along this process, and every time you feel like I can't do this, and then you do it anyway, your muscle gets stronger in terms of this process. And so you just have people that push you, and then you have a willingness to keep going through the discomfort. Then what happens is, maybe it's 2 months from now, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, your identity of I am personal trainer will become true for you. And now everything will change, because you're now communicating from, this is who I am. But to make that identity change requires a lot of getting over these daily challenges. Mm-hmm. So having a mentor is something that's extremely important, right? Having someone who's gone through what you're going through now and has come out on the other end, and they can dangle the carrot and show you, just keep coming, is really important. So I think all of those things are really challenging, because the truth is, especially if you're talking about being an entrepreneur, it's freaking hard, and if you don't have those things set up and you're just relying on your own default mentality, you're gonna come up short. It's too painful.
Yes, I can see that. I've been since we started this journey, we all have been working together. Like you, me, Simmer, William, Regina, Daniel, we all have been working together and growing together through ups and downs. And I can see that has played a huge part in us being able to keep being on this journey and growing at the same time, rather than just throwing in the towel at one point and being like, this is just too much.
Yep.
And just going another way. So yeah, definitely surrounding ourselves with people that are going to push you and, have you be your best self. It's really important.
Exactly. And a lot of times you'll pick people up and help them through really difficult times. And you may not know when it is or how it will happen, but when you go through this with other people, they will turn around and pick you up one day. I know that as we've been going through this, I have more experience in business or whatever, and I've been able to really help you guys through some difficult times and help you through some mindset shifts. And the reality is, there were times when I wasn't sure what my future was going to hold. I almost didn't get married to Simmer because I really truly believed that I was going to ruin her life because of the alcohol thing. And you guys were such a source of love along the way, letting me know that we believe in you and we love you and you're amazing just the way that you are. And at some point I finally believed you. And now, people that meet me now, they can't believe that I went through that, but I did. And it was real. There were dark times, but you guys helped me through that. So having that support system is so important.
Yes, definitely.
So are there some daily practices that someone can do to keep, because it's one thing to understand the conversation of whether I have a fixed or a growth mindset, that okay, I conceptually understand that this is what it is, but how do I bring it into my daily life? Is there a daily ritual, or is there something I can do every single day to keep bringing more of that awareness into my life, to make sure that, because you always want to keep identifying areas, right? It's like just what you said earlier, that there are people that would identify as, I have a growth mindset and I don't need to keep worrying about this anymore, which is again, fixed mindset, right? It's really easy to sort of get lost in that fixed growth kind of circle. So what can someone do every day to bring more awareness into this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this is where I believe that humility really comes into the process as well, and cultivating being a lifelong learner. So creating the identity for yourself, that who I am as a learner, right? It's kind of a white belt in martial arts, they call it a white belt mentality, which means even if you're a black belt, you approach this every interaction as an ability to, there's an opportunity to learn. And I think if you are ever around masters, of anything, whether it's mindfulness, meditation, yoga, any sort of skill. The people who are the best, they don't need to talk about it. They don't need to show people, right? There's a certain humility and a always wanting to learn more that's there. So I think one of the things that's the most important in terms of daily stuff is, first of all, personal development. I know you guys know me. I have my headphones in when I'm cooking, when I'm running, when I'm doing my fitness, when I'm cleaning. If I'm just doing anything that's like menial task, right? I always have my personal development in, and then there's time set aside every day for personal development. So listening to audiobooks, listening to people who embody this type of mentality, that type of thing. Really, really important. Obviously, meditation has been a huge part of my life, specifically because it requires the practice of mindfulness, which means paying attention to your thinking. Okay. I don't think of meditation as the desire to empty your mind. Okay. You might get there at some point, but I think of mindfulness as paying attention to what you're doing. And that's so important, because if you can practice, when you meditate, it actually builds your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your mind that you can become conscious of. It has your executive functions, which are the functions that control the rest of it, if that makes sense. And doing meditation is like going to the gym for that part of your mind. So the more that you can be aware of your thinking, the more conscious it is, and the less that you're just operating out of your unconscious programs. So developing that capacity is really important. The other thing that I think is really important is making sure that you communicate with the people that are in your life that you know and trust, that you want them to tell you the truth, and that you're okay with criticism, and that you want them to be honest with you instead of sugarcoating things. I think it's important to cultivate relationships like that. At least one or two people in your life where you know that they're going to tell you what you need to hear and not what you want to hear. So that I feel like that's really important. It's kind of associated with the mindfulness as well, but you have these things called emotional triggers. So there will be areas in your life where you're so fixed because of things that have happened to you in your past that you may not have conscious control over your emotional or physiological reaction, right? So pay attention to the times in your life when you all of a sudden feel really low really quickly, because this is an area where it's not like there's nothing wrong. But now you can start realizing, oh my God, it just happened again. As soon as you catch it, you're now developing the ability to lessen the intensity of that trigger, because you're disassociating it with, who you think that you are. So being really conscious of these really strong emotional triggers is something that's really important. And, obviously the meditation, things like that can help with that. Obviously we met on a landmark program with a personal development course. So personal development courses are really important.
So can you give us an example of a trigger and how that is a fixed mindset?
Yeah, so I'll just speak for myself. So sometimes when someone shares something with me that is not it's not congratulatory, right? Or they say this, you did something wrong here. Oftentimes I will feel almost an immediate sense of like deflating, like shrinking right away. Okay. Now I don't know when that got conditioned into me, right? And it doesn't matter. All that matters now is that I pay attention to when that happens. You know, a lot of times you'll do the courses and stuff, and they'll say, you know, go back into your past and figure out when it first started happening, the decision that you made. You know, I do think that there's some merit in that. But ultimately, what matters is what's happening right now, in the moment. And so when you train yourself to be aware of this, you will feel when you shrink. And you can stop and you can say, okay, whoa, what just happened there? I just made something that happened mean something about who I am. And this is the area that's the most important, is just paying attention to when that shrink happens, so that you can literally recondition. You can recondition your mind in a different way, because the growth mindset, really, one of the fundamental beliefs is it's not what happens to you in your life, it's how you respond to what happens, right? You have 100% control over what happens. You have very little control over what actually happens, like the circumstances of your life. So yeah, that's something that happens for me. Another thing is when I feel disrespected, if I feel like someone is actually, now I'm much more open to criticism, so that happens less. But it still happens a lot when I feel like someone is talking down to me. So someone might say, hey, you didn't do a very good job here. And that generally doesn't get me too hot and bothered anymore. I've developed that area of myself usually. But when I feel like people are talking down to me, this is a really big trigger for me. So what immediately comes up for me is, don't you can talk to me like that. And when that happens, oftentimes I feel my body will get hot, and I can feel an immediate desire to speak and to be defensive instead of ask questions. And here's when I know, woo, I'm triggered, boy. And so when that happens, okay, now it's a real opportunity for me to pay attention to that. So we all have different triggers. Sometimes it's to attack, and sometimes it's to shrink. So it will show up different ways for everyone. But anytime you're reacting very strongly to some sort of external stimulus in your life, you know that you have some sort of fixed mindset trigger happening. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I'm just trying to like see how, say for example, if someone is talking down to you and that's a trigger for you and it really gets you defensive. So how would you say, is that a fixed mindset?
So it's fixed because I believe that they're saying something about me, that there's something about me that is reacting to what they're saying. So for example, if someone said, if someone says to me, you're an idiot, or you do something like that, right? If I was in a growth mindset, that wouldn't affect me, because I would just get, okay, that's their point of view. Or I could say, look, I don't think that's true, but can you tell me more about that? Because there's probably some truth in what this person is saying. People don't just say things that have no truth in them very often. So if I'm in a growth mindset, I'm curious, just out of curiosity, like I actually don't believe what you just said, but can you share with me a little bit more about why you're saying that? Because the belief there is that there's something that you can probably take away from this situation that could be potentially helpful. Whereas the fixed mindset is immediately like, either I believe this person is a particular way, they are that way, or there's something about me that, that's fixed, that I now need to defend. Something like that. In the growth mindset, there's never anything to defend, because life is always happening for you. Everything that happens in your life, you are responsible for in some way, and it's an opportunity to grow. So someone is saying words, and then I'm either attaching a negative meaning, which comes from the fixed mindset, or I have openness to what's coming to me, and that's from the growth mindset.
Yeah. So like the negative meaning would typically be either belief that you hold about yourself which gets triggered. So if someone talks down to you and you feel like they're saying you're an idiot, and if you have a belief that you might be, then of course you want to actually defend yourself in that moment. But if you're clear, it's kind of like, you know, if you're already tall and someone says, oh, you're a dwarf, that would have no trigger at all, because you'd be like, okay.
That doesn't even register for me as possible. Can you please share with me what would make you say something so strange? But yeah, if someone says you're an idiot, so you can look back in your life, right? If that triggers you, then there's a good chance if you kick a chair or you drop something, I can promise you that what immediately comes up for you automatically is probably, God, I'm such an idiot, right? And that's a small thing. And it doesn't mean that you walk around saying to yourself that I'm an idiot all the time. But there is some sort of unconscious belief in there where, you know, you're stupid or there's something, you know, in that area. So that when someone else says it, it actually triggers your belief. It has nothing to do with what they're saying. It's your belief that gets triggered. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. If I'm tall and someone says that I'm short, I'll be like, what are you talking about? If someone says you're an idiot and I don't believe that, it's like, well, why would you say that? And if just one more thing, in terms of resources, I don't know if people, you know, obviously people listening to this, there's another book called Grit by Angela Duckworth, where she kind of takes the research from Carol Dweck's mindset book and she bears it out in terms of real life examples. And she has this word grit that she coined, which she says is a combination of passion and persistence. And what she shows is at the is it the Citadel? No, whether it's the West Point, which is like the highest Army cadets in the US, or athletes, or these top performing CEOs at all these different corporations, she goes out and she tests what makes people successful. And more than talent, more than IQ, more than anything, when they did these tests, what they found was the thing that made people successful more than anything else was this formula that she called grit, which is the passion and the persistence to overcome challenges. And that oftentimes in a counterintuitive way, but it makes sense if you think about it, people that have a lot of talent, oftentimes over time in their life, they'll get beat by people who are much grittier, people that have more perseverance, because they will develop their skill set until they surpass the person who has talent. But because the person has talent, they think that there's something special about them and that they'll just naturally be able to do these things. They don't spend time developing these skill sets. And so their talent will level out. Whereas somebody that maybe starts down here, because of their growth mindset, they're constantly working harder, they will actually surpass someone who has superior talent. So the growth mindset doesn't believe that we're all just, we all start at zero and everybody's a blank slate, okay? It doesn't believe that. There is something called IQ and there is something called talent. And sometimes people are born with more or less of these things. But what's important is your relationship to that and the belief that if you put in hard work over time, you can develop yourself almost infinitely.
I think I have this book. I haven't started it yet, but I might just do that. The grit, the second one that you were sharing about.
Yeah. Well, you can go onto YouTube and there's a short video that talks about what's in it. You can see what she says there and see what you think.
Okay, and the other book that you were talking about was Carol Dweck.
Carol Dweck.
Okay.
It's called Mindset.
Okay.
Yeah, I listened to that book. It's amazing.
Incredible
really
book.
amazing.
Perfect. So, Nathan, any last advice for the listeners?
My last advice for the listeners is that what is possible for you is beyond anything that you currently think is possible for you right now. And if you really want to live a life where, I'm not talking about riches and, you know, monetary success and all those things are amazing as well. And if you want those, you can have them. But if you want a life of fulfillment, meaning you're proud of who you are and what you've achieved, then really I believe that the growth mindset is the most important thing that any human being can develop, because it leads to a life well lived. It leads to fulfillment in what you're doing, because you can be relatively mediocre at something, but if you're trying hard, you're doing your best, and you're enjoying the process of growing, it brings you happiness. And if what we're after is happiness in life, then if this is kind of, you hear people say, enjoy the, you know, love the process, not the outcome. This is why, because if you do authentically fall in love with the process of learning and growing, you will live a happy life. And if you don't do that, then you're gonna be frustrated for the rest of your life. So what's possible for you is beyond anything that you can imagine. And really learn to love challenges and obstacles in your life, because they're a great source of joy.
That's amazing last words of advice. So where can everyone connect with you? Where can people find you and connect with you?
So you can find me on Instagram under Nathan McCullough. And also I have a new Instagram channel called Rising Phoenix Wellness, which is a new brand that I'm creating that is for men and around this area of recovery. I didn't really talk about it much today, but my going through my own recovery process in my own life, plus this ferocious belief that I have that people are capable of anything, I'm really passionate about sharing that message with other men and helping them overcome, difficult times in their life, in particular the area of substance abuse and different things like that, like going through the process of recovery. So Rising Phoenix Wellness is my Instagram channel. And then I'm on Facebook as Nathan McCullough. It's Nathan McCullough everywhere. So Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of that. YouTube.
Awesome. We will put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for today. Obviously, we're going to have you again on our show because we have so much to talk about. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. This was an amazing conversation, and I'm sure that everyone's going to get so much value out of it.
You're very welcome. And I will end by saying that I love you both very much. We've been on this journey together for quite a long time, and I've seen you guys grow so much. So you really are living embodiments of what's possible when you develop a growth mindset. So thank you so much for having me on, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Yeah, we love you too.
Love you.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye.